Hi, my name is Cindy Rang and I'm the owner of the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington, and our website is www.fabricpatch.net, and we just want to show you this really fast little project. We call it Thelma's Cubby. Thelma has made hundreds of these. She's been making them for about 15 to 20 years, and they're just a fun little project. You can put all of your hand quilting notions in there, your hand embroidery, your wool embroidery, or better yet, you can make one of these for a teacher, for a teacher's desk. It just sort of looks like a little apron. It's a little apron for your cup, and you just tuck it inside there, and it has all of this little color, and so you can put things on the inside, things on the outside, and it makes it kind of fun. If you feel like you need just a little extra just to hold something in place, you can go ahead and put on just a little bit of Velcro on there, and then what happens is when you put this in there, you can just go ahead and attach it underneath there, and it'll stay. Just not that this is ever going to come out, but if you feel like you need that, then you can add that. Anyway, so they're really simple to make, and you can actually get two out of 2 fat quarters, 2 yards of biased binding, and 20 inches of fusible batting. This fusible batting, I think it's only 20 inches wide, and we sell it for $2.99 a yard. If you have just some other kind of batting, leftover scrap, you can go ahead and use that, but this is what we kind of like, because we like that it sort of stays together. All right, I'm going to put this over here, and let me show you how these go together. So you want to first download this. I don't know if I mentioned there's a link just below that has the pattern on it. Sometimes when you print off a pattern, it might get a little bit distorted, but it'll be easy enough, and I'm going to show you that funny edge. So you have piece A, this large piece, and then you have just this little flap. It's not really 2 different pieces, it's just that my piece of paper is not quite big enough. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut that, and then you're going to attach piece B right here on top of piece A and put a piece of tape. You can see mine has been well used. Lots of stuff. You can actually make this out of just regular template plastic if you think you're going to make a bunch of them, or you can make it out of freezer paper, and then when you iron it in place, it's not going to slip when you cut it out. So the other thing too that I just want to mention, I will mention this again in a few minutes, but there's some numbers down here. I didn't add it to the pattern. I probably should have, but the truth is you can kind of do whatever you want to do. I just want you to know what is suggested, and when I talk about this step, I'll mention these numbers, and it's just that from the center, these are 3 inch, and then it's 4 inches to the end. And then up here, here's the center, it's 1 1/4 inches, and then another 1 1/4 inch, or this number says 2.5 from the center, so 1 1/4, 1 1/4. So you can write those numbers down, use those later if you'd like to, or again, there is some flexibility. All right, so what you're going to do when you make these is you're going to lay this out. So what I have here, let me get some of this out of the way here for a second. What I have is my 2 fat quarters, and I have my piece of fusible batting. Again, I do like the fusible because I like that it's not going to slip, and this makes it kind of a quick project, but you can use whatever batting scrap you have. And then I have my 2 fat quarters. You can see that I laid my 2 fat quarters out one on top of each other, and I put them wrong sides together. You could also do right sides together. You just want them opposite because we're going to cut out the 2 sets, and when we sew right sides together, we just want to make sure that they're opposing. You know, you've got a right side and a reverse side. Does that make sense? That should make sense. All right, I'm going to put my bias binding to the side for a second. So what you're going to do, so I've got my fat quarters laid out, and since this is 20 inches, you can see it doesn't come all the way over, but it doesn't need to. I just have to cut out 2 that are this size, so this is just going to be waist. All right, so I've got my fat quarter. This side I've already trimmed up nice and straight. I'm just going to lay this down on top of it, and I'm going to cut a 6-inch strip. I've cut my 6-inch strip, and again, this is just waist or for something different, and I have my 2 little edges here. And then this, I'm going to lay this, I'm actually going to turn this around so I can kind of see it. And when I cut these out, it would be, I would again use freezer paper. I would iron this down so that it's nice and stays tight. And then for me, I tend to sort of live on the edge. So I'm just going to take my rotary cutter with my sharp blade, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut all the way around. And that's what I would do, is I would cut out one here, I would cut out another set here. If you feel uncomfortable with that, you could go ahead and take the scissors and you could cut. You could take an appropriate marking utensil, you could draw a line, remove that, and then cut. And again, if you're having a little person do that, you might, I don't know, maybe a razor blade on a wheel might not be a good thing to give them, because maybe they do want to make this for a teacher. So again, you can just go ahead and trace around and cut it out on a scissors. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut these out, and maybe let me just go ahead and do it really fast because I need to show you what you're going to end up with.
And freezer paper, I think, is a good option. You can get freezer paper at Walmart, Safeway, any grocery store, because you do it for wrapping meat. And the shiny side will actually almost adhere to your fabric. And you can do it to the right side or the wrong side, depending on if you need a reverse side, which is really nice if you need a kiddo to do some sort of crafts so you can remain sewing. You can make 3 templates, fuse your freezer paper to each 3 layers, and they can be cutting while you are cutting out your project or finishing your project, and then you guys can be doing it together. And then your freezer paper just peels right off, and it doesn't leave any residue or anything, and it will refuse, I think, like 3 times before you have to make a new one.
All right, so careful with your fingers, you know. Do that part, you know, the way that you feel most comfortable. I agree with Brianna, the freezer paper or tracing something. So when you're done, you've got this one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to do another one. Now, one thing that I may have failed to mention in the beginning is that when I laid my fat quarter out, I don't know if you noticed, but a fat quarter is, of course, half of a yard, and so it is 20 or 22 inches this way by a half a yard, or 18 inches this way. When I cut this 6-inch strip off, I wanted to make sure that I have got my 20 to 22 inches. And that's what gives me enough to cut this one out here and this one out here. If I would have turned that so that it was a long ways this way, things would have been a little bit weird. So I should have mentioned that first up, that lay your fat quarter out long ways so that this strip is roughly 6 inches by 20 to 22 inches. All right, so I've got this one, and then this one is going to be for my next one. I'm going to put this, no, I'm going to put this over here for a second. Okay, so now I've got these two, and see, now I have mirror image. That's why you either want wrong sides together or you want right sides together. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my batting in there. And again, what I like about this is that it's fusible, so I can go ahead and take my iron that down, and nothing is going to slip very much. So I've got this, I've got these all laid out. Now comes the binding. Most quilters turn their nose up just a little bit at pre-made binding, and that's fine. This is $1.89 a yard, and so it's super inexpensive. And again, if you're going to make kind of a quick project, this is a really reasonable thing. If you want to go ahead and prepare your binding and make your own binding, that's great too. You just want to make sure that it's bias binding, because we are going to be going around a curve. If you're not familiar with bias binding, I know that we have a video on that and you can watch that. So what you're going to do, and so I'm not going to go into huge detail about binding on this. So what you're going to do is, and again, I had mentioned in the beginning that you need 2 yards of bias binding to make 2 of them. So this is just 1 yard for this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this binding on. I'm just going to go ahead and clip this, because what's going to happen is, since it's double fold binding, I'm just going to sew this, and then I'm going to flip it around and sew it down. So what it's going to look like is it's going to look like this. So this binding has been sewn on, and this is still open. So then what's going to happen after you've sewn that binding on, you're going to flip this over. And when you flipped this over, remember when I said, oh, and then there was some numbers there? What you're going to do is you're going to find the center of this, and then go to your sewing machine, and once you found the center, you're going to sew, backstitch to tack that down, sew this line, and backstitch right there. measure over 1.25 inches and do it again, measure over 1.25 inches there and do it again, and it's going to end up looking like this. So see my little seams there that have been sewn, right? So those are all sewn. So that's your inside pockets. And that's where I was saying, you don't have to do it that way. This is the way this one was done. It isn't the only way to do it, because depending upon how big you feel like those pockets in there need to be, maybe you want them bigger, maybe you want them smaller, you know, it doesn't make any difference. So you can do whatever you want to do. This is what I did, is one in the center, 1.25 inches, 1.25 inches. All right, once you've got that done, then what you're going to do is, and in fact, I'm going to flip this over as if I'm doing my blue up. Then what you're going to do, the next part, I feel like I need to turn around to you guys, is you're going, well here, let me do this. You're going to take your piece, I feel like it should match what we're doing. So here's your 6-inch piece. You're going to go over to the iron, you're going to fold this over, and you're just going to go ahead and press it. You do not need batting in there. This is just a double fold piece of cotton. You're perfectly okay. You're just going to press it and press the seam in it. Once you've done that, so I've done that with this one, you're actually going to have a straight edge. This was trimmed off. Yours is going to look, you know, like that, and you'll trim that off before you put your binding on. So you'll notice that right there. So then the next number that I have down here at the bottom is 4 inches, 3, 3, 3, 3, and 4 inches. So what should happen, and again, you have a little bit of flexibility depending upon the size of your fat quarter. We're assuming that it's 20 to 22 inches. So what I did is I just folded this over and found the center, and I marked a line. And so I have this little chalk pencil, and here's my center. And then I measured 3 inches out. So here's my center. 3 inches out, marked a line, 3 inches out, marked a line, and then another 3 inches out, marked a line, another 3 inches from there, right? 3, 3, and then what was left at the end was 4 inches. Again, whatever you want it to be. This is how big your outside pockets are. We wanted those outside pockets to be big enough for a spool of thread. If you want them to be way bigger or way smaller, you could do whatever you wanted to do. It doesn't really matter, but this was the way that we did it. This was the way Thelma always did it. So then what you're gonna do is you're going to line this up, and if you want to trim off, because you are going to come here to the edge, if you want to trim that edge, you can go ahead and do that. Oh, actually I need to do it with this one. Oh, and let me just show you. So this one was one, so this was a fat quarter. You can see the colors of the fat quarter. So one of them will have this and this, and one of them will have blue and blue. Does that make sense? So they're kind of opposite. So, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this one, because this one I put the marks on, and this one has the sewing up here. So I'm gonna put that on the edge, and then what happens, see that first line that we know is about roughly 4 inches over? And see this sewing line here? I'm just going to kind of lift that up so this is out of the way, line that up basically right there, and I'm going to do the same thing. Back tack that and sew off the end. Then I'm going to take my next line, which, is right there, and I'm going to bring that over on top, bring that down, I'm going to do the same thing. Sew on that back tack and sew down. Here's my next one, and I'm just going to keep, sorry. So there's my first one right there. Here's my next line. You could almost see through it on the other side, couldn't you? There you go. Back tack, sew down. Here's my next one. Here it is. So I'm just going to kind of bring that over, line that up, back tack, sew down. Here's my next one. I wanted to line it up with that one. Tack that, sew down there. And here's my last one. There's the line. There was that line right there. Again, you can see, and you just want to kind of get this out of the way, because if you just kind of bring this over and you sew that down, then you don't have this pouchy pocket, right? You don't have this pocket that sticks out. So that's why you want to kind of get that out of the way, lay that down, back tack, sew to the end, and then do the same thing, bring that over. So then once you've done that, it's gonna look kind of like that. And then go ahead and take your pins, pin those down just a little bit, because then your last step is going to be putting your binding on. And that's why you need biased binding, is because you're going to sew down one side and you're going to sew around this curve, and you're just going to be kind of careful. You just want to lay everything out. Once you've sewn all of those down, these are all just going to lay over the top. Let me get the one that's done.
And it might be a nice idea, do a stay stitch, so when you do sew your binding on it, you don't have to worry about who's flapping in the wind somewhere.
Yes, smart. So see, you can see the stitches that are underneath there. And so this is just laid over the top of it. And again, it doesn't really matter. No one is ever going to see this side and that side at the same time, because of course it's inside the cup, right? So here, let's grab this one again. Right? Because then after you've put your binding on and you've sewn your binding all the way around, and again, that's why you need bias binding, come all the way up around. Don't be too worried about that. I mean, we just fold it over to start and then sew in. See that little edge right there? And then, because no one is going to see that, I mean, you still want it to be nice and tidy, but because it's clear down in there. And that's it. That's it. So what will happen is, again, you do end up with two of them. So this one's going to go like this. This one's going to be here. This one's going to be here. So you end up with opposites. And the same thing will be true with this one. This one will be like this. This will be on the bottom. And then we picked this red binding. We thought that was kind of fun. And the same thing here with your opposite one. So anyway, just a super fun, fast, quick project if you have kids at home with nothing to do that are missing their teachers. Maybe that isn't a thing, that they miss their teachers, but anyway, maybe they are and they just want to make a present, and anyway, super fast thing to make. So we hope you enjoy it, and again, it's Thelma's Cubby.